The howl of the winter wind nearly drowned out the soft whimpering coming from the far corner of Caleb Dawson's stable. He paused at the entrance, lantern held high, his breath forming clouds in the frigid January air of 1878. A blizzard had descended upon the Wyoming territory without mercy, and Caleb had only ventured out to check on his horses. He hadn't expected to find anything else seeking shelter from the storm. "Hello?" he called out cautiously, his free hand instinctively moving to the revolver holstered at his hip. "Someone there?" The whimpering stopped abruptly, replaced by a terrified silence. Caleb moved deeper into the stable, the warm smell of hay and horses filling his nostrils as he carefully approached the sound's origin. The lantern light finally fell upon a huddled figure pressed against the wall behind a stack of hay bales. A woman, her dress torn and muddied, arms wrapped tightly around herself, was staring up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Madam," Caleb said softly, lowering his lantern. "You're freezing out here." She shrank back further, her teeth chattering as she shook her head. Even in the dim light, Caleb could see her face was bruised, a cut on her lips still fresh. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, setting the lantern down and removing his coat. "Here, take this." He extended the coat slowly, keeping his distance. She eyed him warily before reaching out with trembling fingers to take it. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please." "He can't find me." Caleb froze. "Who can't find you?" "My husband." Her eyes darted toward the stable doors as if expecting them to burst open at any moment. "If he discovers I've gone, he'll kill me this time." Caleb Dawson had seen his share of trouble in his 32 years. After fighting in the war and spending the last decade building his modest ranch, he thought he'd seen it all. But the raw terror in this woman's eyes made his blood run cold. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Delilah," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "Delilah Abbott." "Well, Miss Delilah, that storm out there is getting worse by the minute. My cabin's just up the hill. I can offer you a warm fire and some hot food." She shook her head vigorously. "I can't. He'll come looking. Thomas always finds me." "Not in this weather he won't," Caleb assured her, glancing toward the stable doors where snow was piling up against the entrance. "And even if he tried, he'd have to get past me first." Delilah studied his face carefully, searching for deception or cruelty like she'd grown accustomed to seeing. Finding none, she nodded hesitantly. "Just until the storm passes," she whispered. Caleb nodded. "Can you walk?" She attempted to stand but winced in pain. Without asking, Caleb scooped her up, surprised at how little she weighed. Delilah stiffened at his touch but didn't resist. "I'll come back for the horses once you're settled," he said, carrying her toward the door. "Hold tight now." The short journey to his cabin was brutal. The wind cut through them like a knife, and the snow was nearly knee-deep in places. By the time Caleb kicked open his cabin door, Delilah was shivering uncontrollably against his chest. Inside, the embers of the morning's fire still glowed in the hearth. Caleb gently set Delilah down on the worn leather chair near the fireplace and quickly built up the flames until they were crackling warmly. "I'll fetch you some dry clothes," he said, moving toward an old trunk in the corner. Delilah watched him warily, clutching his coat around her shoulders. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Caleb paused, considering her question. "My ma raised me to believe a man who doesn't help someone in need isn't much of a man at all." He retrieved a clean flannel shirt and a pair of trousers. "These will be too big, but they're dry. There's a screen in the corner you can change behind. I'll put some coffee on and check on the horses." He turned to leave, giving her privacy, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Dawson? Just Caleb is fine." "Thank you, Caleb." He nodded once and stepped back out into the storm. When Caleb returned, stomping snow from his boots, Delilah was seated by the fire in his oversized clothes. Her damp dress hung over the screen to dry. In the proper light of the cabin, he could fully see the extent of her injuries. Her right eye was swollen, her lips split, and finger-shaped bruises marked her slender neck. Anger flared in Caleb's chest, but he kept his expression neutral as he hung up his coat. "Coffee's hot," Delilah said softly. "I hope you don't mind that I poured myself a cup." "Not at all." Caleb poured himself some coffee and sat across from her. "Those horses are settled for the night. Storm's getting worse, though. Might be snowed in for a couple of days." Fear flickered across Delilah's face. "I can't stay that long. Thomas will. Thomas won't be traveling in this weather either." Caleb interrupted gently. "Where's your home, if you don't mind my asking?" "White Ridge, about 15 miles east." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "That's Bannerman territory." "Your husband wouldn't be Thomas Abbott, would he? Owns the mercantile there." Delilah's fingers tightened around her mug. "You know him?" "Only by reputation. Man's got a mean streak when he drinks." Caleb studied her face. "How long have you been married?" 3 years, she replied, her gaze fixed on the flames. "It wasn't always like this. When we first married, he was kind, or at least I thought he was. But after his business started struggling." She trailed off, unconsciously touching the bruise on her face. "No man has the right to lay hands on his wife," Caleb said firmly. "No matter the troubles he faces." Delilah gave a bitter laugh. "Try telling him that. According to Thomas, a wife is property, same as his horses or his store." They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howling wind outside. "You should get some rest," Caleb finally said, rising to his feet. "You can take the bed. I'll sleep out here." Delilah looked alarmed. "I couldn't take your bed. I insist." Caleb's tone brooked no argument. "You're injured and exhausted. The bed's through that door. There's extra blankets in the chest if you need them." Delilah hesitated but eventually nodded, too weary to protest further. "Thank you again." "No need for thanks. Get some sleep now." After Delilah disappeared into the bedroom, Caleb added another log to the fire and sat heavily in his chair. He had a feeling that Thomas Abbott wouldn't let his wife go easily, storm or no storm. And Caleb Dawson wasn't the type of man to turn away someone in need, especially not when that someone had eyes that seemed to look straight into his soul, despite all the fear and pain they held. The night passed uneventfully, with the storm raging outside. Caleb dozed in his chair, waking occasionally to add wood to the fire. Shortly before dawn, he was startled awake by screams coming from the bedroom. He burst through the door to find Delilah thrashing in the bed, clearly caught in the grip of a terrible nightmare. "Delilah," he called, keeping his distance. "Delilah, wake up. You're safe." Her eyes flew open, wild with terror until they focused on Caleb's concerned face. "I'm sorry," she gasped, pushing herself upright. "I was back there, with him." "No need to apologize," Caleb said gently. "Would you like some water?" She nodded and he fetched her a cup. As she drank, her hands gradually stopped shaking. "Does this happen often?" he asked. "The nightmares?" "Yes." Delilah set the empty cup aside. "They started about a year ago, after the first time She swallowed hard. "After the first time he nearly killed me." Caleb's jaw tightened. "What happened?" "I spilled coffee on some of his ledgers," she said quietly. "He'd been drinking, said I'd ruined everything on purpose. He threw me down the stairs. I broke 2 ribs and my wrist. And no one in town did anything?" Delilah's laugh was hollow. "Thomas told everyone I'd fallen. And who would question him? He's a respected businessman. I'm just his clumsy wife." The bitter resignation in her voice made Caleb's heart ache. "What made you run this time?" Delilah's hand unconsciously went to her throat, where the bruises stood out starkly against her pale skin. "Yesterday, he found a letter I'd written to my sister in Denver. I've been saving what little money I could, planning to escape to her. When he found the letter..." She shuddered. "He said he'd rather see me dead than let me leave him, and I knew he meant it." "How did you get away?" "He passed out drunk. I took what I could carry and just ran. I didn't have a plan beyond getting as far away as possible." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "I can't go back, Caleb. I won't survive it." "You won't have to," he promised, the words coming out before he could think them through. "We'll figure something out." The storm continued for 2 more days, confining them to the cabin. Slowly, Delilah began to relax in Caleb's presence. She helped him cook meals and tended to the fireplace while he cared for the livestock. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, and Caleb told her stories of his travels after the war, before he'd settled on his small ranch. Delilah, in turn, shared fragments of her life before Thomas, how she'd grown up on a small farm in Missouri, the youngest of 5 children. How she'd always dreamed of teaching school until her father's death had forced the family to sell the farm. How she'd come west with her older brother, who'd later died of fever, leaving her alone until Thomas Abbott had courted her with promises of security and respect. "I was such a fool," she said on the 3rd night, as they sat side by side on the cabin's small sofa. "I mistook his possessiveness for love." "You were young and alone," Caleb replied, "and he showed you the face he wanted you to see. Still, I should have known better." Delilah sighed, absently running her fingers over her healing lip. "My father never raised a hand to my mother, not once in 30 years of marriage." "Nor should any man," Caleb agreed. "My father taught me that a man who beats his wife is no man at all, just a coward with fists." Delilah studied his face in the firelight. At 32, Caleb's features were weathered from years under the western sun, with lines at the corners of his blue eyes that deepened when he smiled. His brown hair was streaked with early strands of gray at the temples, and a scar ran along his jaw, a reminder of his time fighting for the Union. "Have you ever been married, Caleb?" she asked suddenly. He shook his head. "Came close once before the war. Her name was Sarah. She couldn't wait for me to return. Married a shopkeeper in Kansas City instead." "I'm sorry." Caleb smiled faintly. "Don't be. We were young, and after the war. Well, I wasn't the same man who left. Took me years to find my footing again." "Is that why you live out here alone?" "Partly. Mostly I just prefer the quiet. Town's got too many people with too many opinions about how a man should live his life." The fire popped loudly, sending sparks up the chimney. "What will you do when the storm clears?" Caleb asked after a moment. Delilah's expression grew troubled. "I still hope to reach my sister in Denver. But I have so little money, and Thomas will be looking for me." "I could take you," Caleb offered. "I've been meaning to make a supply run to Cheyenne anyway. Could continue on to Denver from there." Hope flickered across Delilah's face. "You would do that for me?" "I would." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Delilah quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing. "Thank you," she whispered. "But I've imposed on your kindness enough already." "It's no imposition," Caleb assured her. "Besides, I wouldn't feel right knowing you were out there alone with that man searching for you." The following morning dawned clear and bright. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow that sparkled in the sunlight. Caleb stepped outside to check the road conditions while Delilah prepared breakfast. He was halfway to the stable when he spotted them 3 riders approaching from the east, still some distance away but unmistakably headed toward his property. Even from afar, Caleb recognized the center figure. Thomas Abbott, a large man with a distinctive red beard. Caleb hurried back to the cabin, his heart pounding. "Delilah," he called as he burst through the door. "Your husband's coming, with 2 other men." The color drained from her face. "How did he find me?" "Doesn't matter now. We need to get you hidden." Caleb glanced around the cabin frantically. "The root cellar. They won't think to look there." He moved quickly, lifting a trapdoor hidden beneath a rug in the corner of the cabin. "It's not comfortable, but it's well hidden. Stay quiet, no matter what you hear." Delilah nodded, clearly terrified but determined. As she descended the narrow ladder, she suddenly reached out and grasped Caleb's hand. "Be careful," she whispered. "Thomas is dangerous when he's angry." "I can handle Thomas Abbott," Caleb assured her, squeezing her hand before closing the trapdoor and replacing the rug. He'd barely finished when a loud pounding rattled the cabin door. "Dawson, open up!" A voice bellowed from outside. Caleb took a deep breath, checked that his revolver was secure in its holster, and opened the door. Thomas Abbott stood on his porch, flanked by 2 rough-looking men Caleb recognized as local troublemakers who often worked as hired muscle. Abbott was a large man, both tall and broad, with a ruddy complexion made worse by habitual drinking. His red beard was flecked with gray, and his small eyes narrowed when they landed on Caleb. "Abbott," Caleb said coolly, "what brings you out this way?" "Don't play dumb, Dawson," Thomas growled. "My wife's run off. Tracks in the snow lead straight to your property before the blizzard hit." Caleb leaned against the doorframe, deliberately casual. "Is that so? Well, I haven't seen her. Been snowed in here for days. Same as everyone else." Thomas stepped forward, using his size to try to intimidate. "Mind if we look around? Just to be sure." "Actually, I do mind," Caleb replied, not budging. "This is private property." Thomas's face darkened with anger. "Listen here, Dawson. That woman is my wife. My property. If you're hiding her, a woman isn't property." "Abbott," Caleb interrupted, his voice hardening. "And from what I hear, you've got a nasty habit of forgetting that fact." "What I do with my wife is my business," Thomas snarled. "Now stand aside." "Not happening," Caleb said, straightening to his full height. He wasn't as large as Abbott, but years of ranch work had made him strong and solid. "I suggest you and your friends leave my land. Now." One of the men with Thomas shifted uneasily. "Come on, Thomas. Maybe she didn't come this way after all. We should check the road to Laramie." But Thomas wasn't listening. His face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "You're hiding her, aren't you? You think I don't know about you, Dawson? Always looking at her in town, thinking I didn't notice." Caleb's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "I hardly know your wife, Abbott." "Liar!" Thomas roared, lunging forward. Caleb was ready for him. He sidestepped the larger man's charge, sending Thomas stumbling into the doorframe. The 2 men with Abbott reached for their weapons, but Caleb was faster, drawing his revolver in one smooth motion. "I wouldn't," he warned them, his voice deadly calm. "Next man who makes a move gets a bullet." Thomas recovered his balance, glaring at Caleb with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over, Dawson. Not by a long shot." "It is for today," Caleb replied evenly. "Now get off my land." For a tense moment, Caleb thought Thomas might attack again, but the larger man finally spat on the porch and backed away. "You'll regret this," he threatened. "Nobody steals from Thomas Abbott." Caleb kept his revolver trained on the 3 men as they mounted their horses and rode away. Only when they were well out of sight did he holster his weapon and close the cabin door. He quickly moved to the trapdoor and lifted it. "Delilah? They're gone. It's safe to come up now." She emerged from the root cellar, visibly shaken. I heard him. He sounded so angry. He was, Caleb admitted, helping her up. But he's gone now. He'll come back, Delilah said, her voice trembling. He won't stop looking for me. Caleb gently guided her to a chair. Then we'll leave before he does. Pack what you need. We're heading to Cheyenne as soon as possible. Today, Delilah asked, surprised. Today, Caleb confirmed. The roads will be difficult after the snow, but passable. And Abbott will likely search elsewhere before coming back here. What about your ranch? My neighbor, old Jim, can keep an eye on things. I'll ride over there first to ask him. Delilah looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Why are you doing all this for me? You barely know me. Caleb hesitated, trying to understand his own actions. There was something about Delilah that had touched him from the moment he found her in his stable, a strength beneath her fear that he admired, a gentleness that had awakened feelings he thought long buried. Let's just say I believe everyone deserves a second chance at happiness, he finally replied. Even me. Their preparations were swift and focused. Caleb rode to his neighbor's homestead to arrange for the care of his livestock, while Delilah gathered supplies for their journey. By mid-afternoon, Caleb had hitched his 2 strongest horses to his wagon, lined the bed with straw and blankets for warmth, and secured their provisions. As Delilah climbed onto the wagon seat beside him, Caleb noticed how different she looked from the terrified woman he'd found in his stable. Though still bruised, her eyes now held determination instead of fear, and she sat straight-backed, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Ready? He asked. She nodded firmly. More than ready. The journey to Cheyenne was arduous. The roads were treacherous with snow and ice, forcing them to travel slowly and cautiously. They spent the first night camped in the wagon, huddled together for warmth as temperatures dropped well below freezing. It was during those quiet hours, with only the stars above and the crackling of their small fire for company, that Delilah began to speak of her dreams she'd set aside when she married Thomas. I always wanted to teach, she confessed. I love books and learning. Thomas thought it was foolish for a woman to want such things. He burned my books when I brought them into his house. What would you teach if you could? Caleb asked. Literature, I think. Or history. Her face softened in the firelight. There's something magical about opening a child's mind to the wider world. You'd make a fine teacher, Caleb said, and meant it. Delilah smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed her face. Perhaps someday I will be. They reached Cheyenne on the 3rd day. The town was bustling despite the winter weather, with the railroad bringing constant activity. Caleb secured them rooms at a modest hotel, separate rooms, though adjacent, and insisted on paying for both. We'll rest here tonight, he told Delilah as they sat in the hotel's small dining room that evening. Tomorrow I'll see about train tickets to Denver. Will you? Delilah hesitated, toying with her fork. Will you continue on to Denver with me? Caleb hadn't considered what he would do after reaching Cheyenne. His ranch needed tending, and he'd already been away longer than planned. Yet the thought of saying goodbye to Delilah felt strangely painful. Would you want me to? He asked carefully. Yes, she admitted softly. I would. Their eyes met across the table, and Caleb felt something shift between them, a recognition of feelings neither had dared acknowledge. The moment was interrupted by a commotion at the hotel entrance. Caleb turned to see a group of men entering the dining room, loud and boisterous. His blood ran cold when he recognized Thomas Abbott among them. Delilah, he said urgently, keeping his voice low, don't turn around. Thomas just walked in. Her face went pale. How did he? Doesn't matter. We need to leave. Now. Caleb stood casually, moving to Delilah's side of the table as if to help her with her chair. Walk normal. Head for the back door. They had almost reached the exit when Thomas's voice boomed across the room. Delilah! She froze, her entire body tensing. Caleb placed a protective hand on her back. Keep walking, he murmured, but it was too late. Thomas was striding toward them, his face contorted with rage. You thieving whore! He shouted, causing every head in the dining room to turn. Caleb stepped in front of Delilah. That's enough, Abbott. You're making a scene. Thomas ignored him, pointing an accusing finger at Delilah. Did you think you could just run off? Take what's mine and disappear. I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine, Delilah replied, her voice surprisingly steady. And I'm not your property, Thomas. The hell you aren't. Thomas lunged forward, trying to grab her arm. Caleb reacted instantly, shoving Thomas back. Don't touch her. The larger man stumbled but quickly recovered, his face purple with fury. You! He spat the word at Caleb. I should have known. Always watching her in town, waiting for your chance. This isn't about me, Caleb said evenly. It's about how you treat your wife. My wife, Thomas emphasized, his voice rising. Mine by law and by God. Not anymore, Delilah said clearly. I'm leaving you, Thomas. For good. Something dangerous flashed in Thomas's eyes. No one leaves me, he growled, reaching inside his coat. Caleb saw the glint of metal and reacted instinctively, drawing his own revolver as Thomas pulled a small derringer from his pocket. The dining room erupted in screams as both men aimed their weapons. Put it down, Abbott, Caleb warned. You don't want to do this. Oh, but I do, Thomas replied, his eyes wild. I'd rather see her dead than with another man. He swung the derringer toward Delilah. Caleb fired without hesitation, the shot deafening in the confined space. Thomas staggered backward, the derringer falling from his hand as blood bloomed across his shoulder. Chaos erupted as patrons scrambled for the exits. Within moments, the hotel owner and the local sheriff burst into the dining room. What in tarnation is going on here? The sheriff demanded, taking in the scene with practiced eyes. That man just tried to shoot this woman, Caleb explained, carefully setting his revolver on a nearby table. I had no choice. Thomas, clutching his wounded shoulder, snarled. He stole my wife. She's my property. The sheriff looked between the men, then at Delilah, noting her fading bruises. That true, madam? You this man's wife? Delilah straightened her shoulders. I am Thomas Abbott's wife, yes, but I'm leaving him because he beats me. He just tried to kill me rather than let me go. The sheriff sighed heavily. Looks like we've got ourselves a situation here. He gestured to his deputy. Get the doc for Mr. Abbott's shoulder. Then I want all three of you down at my office to sort this out. Hours later, Caleb and Delilah sat side by side in the sheriff's office, having given their statements. Thomas had been patched up by the local doctor and was currently locked in a cell, ranting about his rights as a husband. Sheriff Morgan, a grizzled veteran of both the war and frontier law enforcement, leaned back in his chair, studying them thoughtfully. Law's complicated when it comes to marriage, he said finally. Mr. Abbott has certain rights as your husband, madam, though attempted murder ain't one of them. I understand, Delilah replied quietly, but I cannot and will not return to him. The sheriff nodded slowly. I've seen my share of men like Thomas Abbott, mean drunks who take their frustrations out on those weaker than themselves. He scratched his beard thoughtfully. There's a judge coming through next week for circuit court. He can sort out the legal aspects. And until then? Caleb asked. I'll keep Abbott locked up on charges of attempted murder and public endangerment. The sheriff fixed Delilah with a kind but serious gaze. But I'd suggest you continue on to your sisters in Denver, madam. Things might get complicated when the judge arrives. Relief washed over Delilah's face. "Thank you, Sheriff." As they left the sheriff's office, the night air was crisp and cold. Stars glittered overhead in a clear sky, and the streets of Cheyenne were mostly quiet. "What now?" Delilah asked softly as they walked back toward the hotel. Caleb was silent for a moment, considering their options. "We'll take the morning train to Denver as planned. Get you safely to your sisters." And then, there was a vulnerability in her question that made Caleb's heart ache. He stopped walking and turned to face her. In the moonlight, with her bruises fading and her head held high, she looked beautiful and brave, a woman who had faced her worst fears and survived. "And then," he said carefully, "if you're willing, I'd like to court you properly. Once your situation with Abbott is resolved legally." Delilah's eyes widened. "Court me? But your ranch can wait," Caleb finished for her. "Or I can sell it. Start fresh somewhere else." He took her hand gently in his. "These past days with you have made me realize how lonely my life has been. I'd like a chance to see if what I'm feeling could grow into something more." "And what are you feeling?" Delilah whispered. Caleb struggled to find the right words. "Like I found something I didn't even know I was missing. Like I want to protect you and see you smile and hear your thoughts on everything under the sun." A tear slipped down Delilah's cheek. "I feel it too," she admitted. "But I'm afraid. What if I'm making another mistake?" "We'll take it slow," Caleb promised. "Get to know each other properly. And I swear to you, Delilah, I will never raise a hand to you in anger. Never try to dim your light or silence your voice." Delilah studied his face in the moonlight, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she stepped closer and, with gentle hesitation, brushed her lips against his. The kiss was brief and tender, a promise rather than a passion, but it sent warmth spreading through Caleb's chest. When they parted, Delilah's smile was shy but certain. "I'd like that," she said. "A fresh start. Together." 6 months later, Caleb stood on the platform of the Denver railway station, waiting for the train that would take them back to Wyoming. Beside him, Delilah chatted animatedly with her sister, Elizabeth, who had come to see them off. The past months had brought many changes. With the help of Elizabeth's husband, who was a prominent Denver attorney, Delilah had secured a divorce from Thomas Abbott, a rarity, but possible given the evidence of his abuse and the attempted murder charge, for which he was now serving time in the territorial prison. Caleb and Delilah had spent those months getting to know each other properly. He had found work with a local rancher while she had secured a position as an assistant at a small school for girls, finally beginning to fulfill her dream of teaching. And they had fallen deeply, irrevocably in love. "Are you sure about this?" Elizabeth asked Delilah, glancing at Caleb with the protective concern of an older sister. "You could stay here in Denver. Your position at the school is wonderful but temporary," Delilah finished for her. "And yes, I'm very sure." She reached for Caleb's hand, squeezing it gently. "Caleb's ranch needs him. And I need Caleb." Elizabeth sighed but smiled. "Well, you know you're always welcome here if you change your mind." The train whistle blew, signaling their imminent departure. After final hugs and promises to write, Caleb helped Delilah aboard and settled beside her in their compartment. As the train pulled away from the station, Delilah leaned her head against Caleb's shoulder. "Are you happy about going home?" she asked. "Home is wherever you are now," he replied honestly. "But yes, I've missed the ranch." Delilah smiled up at him. "Tell me again about the changes you're making." "The addition to the cabin." 2 rooms, Caleb confirmed. "One for us and one that could serve as your study. A place for your books and papers. And perhaps, someday, a nursery?" Delilah suggested softly. Caleb's heart swelled at the implication. "Whenever you're ready," he agreed. "No rush." Delilah's smile was radiant. "I think we've both waited long enough for happiness," she said. "I don't want to wait too much longer to start our family." As the train carried them westward through the rolling landscape, Caleb marveled at how dramatically his life had changed since that stormy night when he'd found a frightened woman shivering in his stable. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had led him to a love deeper and more profound than he had ever imagined possible. And as Delilah dozed against his shoulder, her face peaceful in sleep, Caleb silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought her to his door and promised himself that he would spend the rest of his life ensuring she never had reason to fear again. In the years that followed, the Dawson Ranch flourished. Caleb and Delilah built not just a home, but a life filled with love, respect, and partnership. Delilah eventually opened a small school on their property, teaching the children of neighboring ranchers. Caleb expanded their holdings, breeding horses that became known throughout the territory for their strength and endurance. They welcomed 3 children of their own, 2 sons, and a daughter who grew up knowing only gentleness and encouragement from their father, and wisdom and strength from their mother. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled outside their snug cabin, Caleb and Delilah would sometimes recall that first night how fear had given way to trust, and trust to love, creating a bond that neither time nor hardship could break. A love born in a storm, weathered by trials, and made stronger for having overcome them.